Imagine a rainy night, the air thick with tension, as a man in a tattered jacket steps through the glass doors of a hospital meant to be a sanctuary only to uncover a chilling truth. What if that man was Keanu Reeves, the Hollywood legend, secretly recording a web of neglect and injustice threatening to destroy his greatest dream? One shocking moment would change everything: a mother's desperate pleas for her feverish child ignored, while the wealthy are whisked away with smiles. What would you do if you had the power to expose it all? Would you stay silent or fight back? Comment 1 if you'd keep quiet, or 2 if you'd take a stand. And hey, where are you watching this from? If this story grips you, hit that subscribe button to Motivation for Success for more tales of courage and change. Now, let's dive into the heart of Keanu's incredible journey, a mission that began with a vision and erupted into a battle for humanity. Keanu Reeves, a man whose name evokes not just cinematic brilliance but a rare, radiant humanity, has long stood apart in a world often blinded by its own excess. On a quiet night, as the city sprawled beneath a canopy of shimmering lights and restless shadows, he sat by a vast window, gazing out at the hurried silhouettes of lives unfolding below. In that stillness, amid the hum of a world that rarely pauses, a spark of profound emotion ignited within him, a vision so vivid, so urgent, that it refused to be contained. It was a decision born not of fleeting impulse but of a deep, unshakable conviction, to pour a significant portion of his immense wealth into creating a hospital, not a mere institution of medicine, but a sanctuary where faith in humanity could be restored, where every soul, rich or poor, would be met with dignity, compassion, and hope. This was no ordinary ambition. For Keanu, it was a calling forged in the crucible of personal observation and quiet sorrow. He had seen too many fragile lives abandoned to the indifference of overcrowded wards, too many faint breaths drowned out by the clatter of a system that had forgotten its purpose. He carried within him the memory of weary eyes pleading for care, of trembling hands reaching for help that never came, of a society scarred by the silent wounds of neglect. Those images lingered like echoes in his soul, each one a testament to a trust betrayed, a humanity diminished. From that pain arose a resolve as fierce as it was tender, to build not just a place of healing, but a movement, a reclamation of the belief that every life matters, that every cry deserves to be heard. In his mind's eye, he saw a hospital unlike any other, a refuge where suffering would find solace, where the sterile chill of clinical routine would give way to the warmth of genuine care. He imagined a space where every patient was more than a number, where every tear was met with empathy, where every heartbeat was honored as sacred. This would be a place built not only with bricks and glass, but with the very essence of his ideals, each detail meticulously chosen to whisper of equity and kindness. He envisioned staff trained not just in medicine but in the art of the heart, their hands guided by a commitment to nurture, their words a balm to the broken. For Keanu, true healing went beyond the body. It was about mending the spirit, about offering the downtrodden a glimpse of their own worth, a chance to rise above the weight of their struggles through the simple, transformative power of being seen. To bring this dream to life, Keanu set aside the trappings of fame and fortune that so often define a man of his stature. He dared to step into the unknown, to stake his resources and reputation on a radical reimagining of healthcare, a system that would cradle both the flesh and the soul. Every choice he made was deliberate, every element of the hospital's design a reflection of his belief that no one should feel lesser in their hour of need. He wanted anyone who crossed its threshold, be they a titan of industry or a weary soul with empty pockets, to feel the same embrace, to know they belonged to a shared haven where compassion was the currency and hope the foundation. This was his rebellion against a world too quick to measure worth in wealth, his quiet roar against the injustices he could no longer abide. The intensity of this vision consumed him. Night after night, he sat awake, wrestling with plans and possibilities, his mind a storm of determination and doubt. Each sleepless hour was a testament to his refusal to let this dream falter, a pledge to breathe life into a revolution of the human spirit. He knew the stakes were high not just for the hospital, but for what it could mean to a society grown numb to its own fractures. To Keanu, this was more than a project, it was a lifeline, a chance to prove that value lies not in titles or bank accounts but in the courage to care, in the actions that lift others from despair. As the blueprint took shape, as the walls of his vision rose from the earth, he felt the weight of every life it might touch, every flicker of hope it might rekindle. If he could shift even a fragment of this weary world, if he could light a spark in the darkness of forgotten hearts, then every sacrifice, every restless night, would be worth it. In those tense, electric moments of creation, Keanu Reeves became more than a man with a dream. He became a force, a quiet warrior wielding compassion as his weapon. His hospital would stand as a beacon, a challenge to a society that had strayed too far from its own humanity, a reminder that change begins when one heart dares to act. And in that act, he offered not just healing, but a mirror to reflect back to us the truth that our worth, our strength, our redemption lie in how we choose to hold one another up. Keanu Reeves's vision for a hospital was never just a financial venture, it was a sacred vow etched into the fabric of his being, a testament to a world where fairness and humanity could triumph over chaos and indifference. It embodied his unyielding belief that even amidst life's fiercest storms, the fragile flame of compassion could still flicker, guiding the lost and the broken toward a brighter dawn. On a cold, rain-soaked night, as streetlights cast trembling reflections across puddles and the city hummed with restless energy, Keanu celebrated not just for his humility but for a heart that refused to turn away from suffering, made a choice that would ripple far beyond the walls he had built. Driven by whispers of mismanagement and a gnawing need to see the truth for himself, he shed the armor of his fame, slipping into the worn threads of an old jacket and faded jeans. In that act of transformation, he became no one a shadow among the weary, a soul stepping into the unknown not for glory, but for justice. As he crossed the threshold of the hospital he had poured his fortune and faith into, each footfall echoed with the weight of his purpose. The glass doors parted, and he entered not as a star, but as a man stripped bare by his own resolve, his chest tight with a storm of emotions, anger at the rumors of neglect, hope that his dreams still held, and a quiet dread of what he might find. The lobby greeted him with a sterile chill, its air thick with the exhaustion of overworked staff and the unspoken despair of those they served. The receptionist's glance skimmed over him, her impatience a silent judgment of his modest guise, and in that moment, he felt the sting of invisibility, a sensation too many had endured in this place meant for healing. Settling into a corner of the waiting room, he became a witness to a gallery of quiet tragedies, the shallow breaths of an elderly patient, the anxious murmur of a mother cradling her feverish child, the resigned sighs of those left to languish. It was not just a hospital he saw, it was a battlefield of unmet needs, a graveyard of promises unkept. This was no reckless quest for answers, it was a pilgrimage of the soul, a deliberate descent into the heart of a system he feared had strayed from its mission. Keanu's anonymity was his strength, a cloak that let him hear the unfiltered pulse of the place he had created to be a sanctuary. His eyes traced every detail, the curt dismissals from the front desk, the icy tones of physicians who spoke as if compassion were a burden, the subtle sneers that branded the poor as less than human. Each observation carved itself into him, a wound that deepened with every passing minute. He watched a mother's pleas for her sick child dissolve into the apathy of an overtaxed nurse, saw the timid glances of patients too afraid to demand more, and felt the air grow heavy with the collective weight of their suffering. His heart thundered against his ribs, a drumbeat of outrage and sorrow, as the chasm between his vision and this reality yawned wide before him. How could a place born of his deepest ideals have become a mirror of the very injustices he sought to erase? Yet within that turmoil, something fiercer took root, a resolve as unbreakable as it was tender. This was not about satisfying curiosity, it was about reclaiming a legacy of care, about proving that even the most tarnished systems could be redeemed. As he sat among the overlooked, treated as nothing more than another faceless name, Keanu felt the full measure of their humiliation, and it fueled him. Every cold word he overheard, every tear-streaked face he memorized, became a spark in the fire of his determination. He was not here to be seen, he was here to see, to bear witness, to gather the shards of truth that would one day shatter the lies. The hospital he had dreamed of, a haven where every life was precious, had been warped by neglect and arrogance, but he would not let it fall. With each heartbeat, he reaffirmed his mission, to restore dignity to those who had been denied it, to demand care for the forgotten, to rebuild what had been broken. When he finally stepped back into the rain-drenched night, Keanu carried more than the ache of what he had seen, he carried a promise. His time in the shadows had unveiled a truth too stark to ignore, a betrayal too profound to forgive. But it had also kindled a fire that no storm could extinguish. He knew the path ahead would be grueling, that exposing the rot and reshaping the hospital would test every ounce of his strength. Yet he also knew that from this quiet act of courage, this willingness to walk unseen among the suffering, the seeds of change had been sown. The hospital would rise again, not as a monument to his name, but as a living pledge to the worth of every soul who entered its doors. In that moment, Keanu Reeves was not just a man who had built a dream, he was a force of reckoning, a quiet warrior whose love for humanity would not be silenced, a beacon proving that even in the darkest corners, justice and kindness could still prevail. As Keanu Reeves stepped into the hospital, he was enveloped by a frigid emptiness, a sterile abyss where human suffering seemed buried beneath layers of rigid paperwork and unyielding rules. From the moment he entered the lobby, the stark divide between the anguished pleas of patients and the weary indifference of the staff struck him like a bitter wind. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the chilling revelation that awaited. Dr. Javier, the chief physician, cloaked in a veneer of calm authority, harbored a cruelty and arrogance so profound it defied comprehension. From his shadowed perch in the waiting room, Keanu watched, his heart sinking, as a mother, her face etched with exhaustion, tears streaming down her cheeks, begged the receptionist for help for her feverish child. Instead of comfort, she met a wall of cold detachment, her desperation dismissed with a flick of impatience. Nearby, an elderly man, trembling with the agony of a failing heart, received not care but scorn, his pain mocked by the callous glances of those meant to heal. These scenes clawed at Keanu's soul, each one a fresh scar, igniting a tempest of emotions within him: grief, rage, and a fierce, unquenchable resolve. Then Dr. Javier emerged, striding through the room with the swagger of a king in his own twisted realm. His presence was a jolt, his confidence unshaken as he gravitated toward a cluster of well-dressed patients, those with wealth dripping from their tailored suits and self-assured smiles. The contrast was staggering, a knife to Keanu's chest. While the poor languished in neglect, their cries unheard, the affluent were ushered forth with syrupy greetings and swift attention. Dr. Javier's words, sharp and biting, cut through the air, not mere quips, but venomous barbs laced with contempt for those he deemed beneath him. Keanu stood motionless, his eyes tracing every move, his ears catching every syllable of disdain, as the doctor's actions laid bare a grotesque truth: this was no sanctuary of healing, but a marketplace where money dictated mercy. The atmosphere grew heavier with each of Dr. Javier's steps, a palpable dread settling over the room. To him, patients were not people but digits, soulless entries in a ledger, and he stripped them of dignity with a ruthlessness that left their spirits as battered as their bodies. The injustice pulsed through the hospital like a festering wound, one Keanu could feel in his bones. A fire roared to life within him, fueled by the unbearable weight of what he witnessed. This was not just one man's tyranny, it was the symptom of a system rotten to its core, a machine that valued profit and prestige over the fragile, beating hearts it was meant to protect. The shallow gasps of the overlooked, the defeated gazes of the forsaken, the invisible agony of the powerless, they were not mere observations to Keanu, but a clarion call. Dr. Javier's every gesture, every dismissive sneer, seared itself into his memory, stoking a determination that burned hotter with each passing second. He saw a mother's hope extinguished by apathy, an old man's suffering trivialized by arrogance, and he knew that silence was no longer an option. This hospital, born from his dream of compassion and equality, had morphed into a monument to cruelty, where human worth was measured in dollars rather than dignity. The realization tore at him, but it also sharpened his purpose. He would not let this stand. Keanu understood that Dr. Javier's reign was not an anomaly but a reflection of a deeper decay, a system so obsessed with numbers and efficiency that it had forsaken its soul. The anguished whispers of the neglected, the biting insults hurled by physicians, the numbed detachment of the staff, they were all threads in a tapestry of inhumanity he could no longer ignore. What he had envisioned as a bastion of care had been eroded by greed, its noble intent drowned beneath the relentless pursuit of revenue and results. Every moment he spent in that waiting room, every story of despair he absorbed, pierced him like a slow, deliberate blade. The hospital's management, once a vessel for his highest ideals, had become a hollow shell, its humanity leached away by a fixation on metrics over mercy. Yet amid the pain, a vow took root: he would expose this betrayal, dismantle its foundations, and rebuild what had been lost. As the hours stretched on, Keanu remained a silent sentinel, soaking in the raw suffering of those around him, the forgotten, the dismissed, the voiceless. Each scene of neglect, each cutting word, deepened the wound in his heart but also forged his resolve into something unbreakable. He knew that if no one rose to speak the truth, the powerless would remain trapped in this cycle of indignity, their faith in kindness extinguished. In that crucible of sorrow and fury, Keanu Reeves made his choice. He would fight not just for the hospital, but for the very essence of what it meant to be human. He would not let cruelty prevail, nor would he allow the spark of compassion he had planted to be snuffed out. With every fiber of his being, he committed to restoring the hospital's soul, to ensuring that every patient, rich or poor, would be met with the respect and care they deserved. This was no longer just a mission, it was a reckoning, a promise to resurrect the fading light of humanity in a place that had forgotten its purpose. In the suffocating weight of that hospital's atmosphere, Keanu Reeves found himself swept into a torrent of raw emotion, a churning blend of uncontainable fury and stunned disbelief at the brutal reality before him. How could a place, crafted with his blood and soul to cradle life, have twisted into a crucible of cruelty, where each heartbeat was reduced to a cold statistic on a page? Every stifled complaint from an overworked staff member, every hollowed gaze from a patient worn thin by neglect, stood as living proof of a system in decay. The powerlessness gnawed at him, the anger surged like wildfire through his veins, an inferno that refused to be quenched. It was a call to arms, a primal urge to rise against the tide of indifference and reclaim the humanity that had been stripped away. But Keanu was not a man to let emotion simmer without purpose. With a heart steeled by resolve and a spirit unafraid to act, he transformed his anguish into a weapon of change. He could no longer stand by while the cries of the poor and the unjustly treated echoed unheard. He would amplify their voices until the walls trembled. Quietly, methodically, he began to gather evidence, scribbling down every damning detail, every act of callousness he witnessed. From the dismissive way the hospital's management shuffled paperwork to the venomous barbs doctors flung at vulnerable patients, nothing escaped his meticulous record. Each fragment of testimony, each whispered confession from a beleaguered worker, became a brick in the foundation of a revolution he was determined to ignite. This was not just documentation, it was a vow, etched in ink and fueled by compassion, to dismantle the inhumanity he had uncovered. Within him, a profound reckoning took shape. The rot wasn't confined to Dr. Javier's arrogance, it festered in the very bones of the system, a structure obsessed with quotas and profit over people. To truly heal this wound, it wasn't enough to cast out one tyrant. The entire machinery of evaluation, the relentless chase for numbers, had to be torn down and rebuilt. Keanu resolved to wield his influence, whether cloaked in anonymity or laid bare for all to see, to demand a sweeping reformation. He envisioned a healthcare system where humanity reigned supreme, where every patient, no matter their wealth, was met with dignity and kindness. It was a dream that pulsed through him, a mission to restore the hospital to its original purpose, a sanctuary, not a slaughterhouse of souls. In the days that followed, Keanu returned again and again, a quiet phantom moving through the corridors. He didn't just observe, he listened. He sought out the voices of the staff, the nurses and aides who bore the weight of the system's failures, and let their stories pour into him. Their laments of burnout, of forced complicity and injustice, were not mere complaints but keys to unlocking a deeper truth. Through their eyes, he saw that empathy from those on the front lines was the lifeline that could resurrect faith in this broken place. Each tale of sorrow, each shared burden, solidified his certainty: without radical change, the innocent would remain crushed beneath the cold tyranny of efficiency. Armed with this understanding, Keanu ignited an internal uprising, not just to purge the corruption, but to rekindle the core of compassion and equity that had once defined his vision. This was no fleeting crusade, it was a journey to breathe life back into every heart the system had forsaken. The revolution Keanu sparked began to ripple through the hospital, a transformation as profound as it was stirring. Walls that once radiated the chill of inequity now seemed to hum with the warmth of renewed humanity. Waiting rooms, once shadowed by anxious stares and unspoken grief, slowly brightened, infused with a fragile but growing hope. Every corner of the building felt touched by a quiet alchemy, as if the very air had been reborn with purpose. From the boardroom to the bedside, a shared awakening took hold. The true calling of this place was not to chase metrics, but to cherish lives. The staff, once shackled by the grind of performance targets, began to see their work anew, not as a race against numbers, but as a sacred duty to care. Keanu's relentless stand had cracked open the hospital's hardened shell, letting light seep into spaces long darkened by neglect. What emerged was not just a reformed institution, but a living testament to the power of one man's refusal to let compassion die, a beacon proving that even in the deepest mire, humanity could rise again. The transformation Keanu Reeves ignited within the hospital reached deep into its very soul, reshaping not just its policies but the hearts of those who walked its halls. Every staff member, from the receptionists who once greeted patients with curt impatience, to the doctors, nurses, and technicians who had grown numb under the weight of routine, was called to a reckoning. They underwent rigorous retraining, not merely in procedure but in the art of humanity itself. Courses in compassionate communication and empathetic care cracked open their guarded spirits, teaching them to listen with their whole beings, to see beyond charts and diagnoses to the fragile, hopeful lives in their hands. What emerged was a staff reborn, one that offered patients not just treatment but solace, a trust and comfort many had never known within these walls. The hospital's air shifted, its once icy corridors softening as each case ceased to be a mere statistic and became a living story, woven with threads of hope, resilience, and kindness. For the patients, the change was nothing short of miraculous. No longer did wealth dictate worth, whether draped in finery or threadbare clothes. Every soul received care that honored their inherent dignity. Those who had once endured pain in silence, their pleas swallowed by neglect, now found themselves cradled by attentive hands and soothed by voices that truly heard them. Each smile that broke through a patient's weariness, each spark of faith rekindled in their eyes, stood as vivid proof of the hospital's rebirth. The emergency rooms and treatment wards, once stark and foreboding, blossomed into spaces of warmth and welcome, a shared home where every individual was cherished. The sterile edges of the past gave way to an embrace of color and life, a testament to the power of treating every person as precious, every moment as sacred. But the ripple of renewal didn't stop with the patients, it coursed through the staff themselves, awakening a pride that had long lain dormant. Nurses who once shuffled through shifts with downcast eyes now stood taller, their belief in their calling reignited. Doctors who had wielded their authority like a shield now approached their work with a fervor born of purpose. The change wasn't confined to new protocols or directives, it lived in the beating hearts of those who served. Fear and hesitation melted away, replaced by a bold confidence and a passion that infused every task with meaning. They understood, perhaps for the first time, that their smallest gestures, the gentle touch, the patient ear, were stitches in a tapestry of healing far greater than themselves. Together, they forged an environment where humanity thrived, where the act of caring became a defiant stand against the cold machinery of efficiency. This newfound spirit wove itself into the fabric of the hospital's daily life, evident in the quiet moments of connection that began to flourish. Conversations between staff blossomed into laughter, shared joys replacing the tension that once reigned. Patients and workers alike discovered a simple, profound truth: when respect and love guide our hands, the world shifts towards something better. And at the center of it all lingered the indelible presence of Keanu Reeves, the man who had dared to confront the darkness, who had refused to let injustice stand. His courage was not just a memory but a living force, etched into the minds of everyone who now walked these transformed halls. He had not merely built a hospital, he had sown the seeds of a movement, proving that one voice, driven by compassion, could topple a mountain of apathy. Then, on a tranquil afternoon, as golden sunlight streamed through the hospital's windows, a small boy darted toward Keanu. His eyes shimmered with gratitude as he spoke, his voice clear and pure. "Thank you, Keanu. Because of you, the doctors here really care about us now." Those innocent words pierced the air, a quiet hymn to the triumph of what mattered most. They were more than thanks, they were a declaration, a promise fulfilled, a confirmation that the mission of caring for one another, of lifting each other with kindness and humanity, had taken root. In that fleeting exchange, the hospital's future unfurled like a dawn breaking after a long night, bright, hopeful, alive with the possibility that every heart could find its place in a world remade by love. Keanu's dream had not just survived, it had flourished, a beacon lighting the way toward a tomorrow where compassion reigned supreme. As twilight bathed Mercy Hospital in a soft glow, Keanu Reeves stood by a window, the hum of renewed life, gentle care, quiet laughter wrapping around him. In the glass, he saw the faces of those he'd fought for, a mother cradling her healed child, an elder eased of pain, staff now proud of their calling. Tears brimmed in his eyes, not from grief but from a deep, tender gratitude. He'd built a hospital, but he'd birthed a legacy of love, a fragile, fierce thread of humanity stitching every heart here. The boy's "thank you, Keanu" rang in his soul, a whisper of triumph proving one person's courage could pierce the darkest neglect. The lesson settled like dust after a storm: real change isn't loud, it's the quiet will to see suffering and act. Compassion isn't given, it's a spark we nurture, capable of burning through apathy if we let it. Keanu's fight mirrors our own potential. What would you do faced with ignored pain? Comment 1 if this moved you to think, 2 if it sparked action. Share your story. When did you see or make a difference that rekindled hope? Your words keep this light burning. Love this? Subscribe to Motivation for Success for more tales that stir the soul and fuel the spirit. Next video, we'll bring you fresh stories of grit and grace, don't miss it. Until then, remember, one choice can heal more than you imagine. See you soon.